This episode of Everyman's Arsenal podcast is proudly sponsored by Nocturn Industries. Introducing the Daisho Bridge, seamlessly connect two night vision monocles to create a powerful dual tube setup. And don't miss out on the Chimera, Nocturn's panoramic night vision goggles. Upgrade your night vision game at nocturnindustries.com and use discount code TLDCO. Nocturn Industries, lighting the night for Everyman's Arsenal.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Everyman's Arsenal podcast, a podcast where we typically take a look, interviewing some of the people behind the products you see on the Thin Line Defense Co. YouTube channel. Today, we have kind of a different one. It's just going to be you and I. We're talking about the state of the Second Amendment. All right, so this is something that Walsh and I have kind of cooked up a little bit, kind of like where are we with the Second Amendment across the U.S. right now? You know, and I think depending on where you go for your news, you're going to get some not so truthful information, or you're going to think that there's nothing out there. For example, I ran through several AIs, ChatGPT, XAI Grok, Gemini, which is Google's, and asked them the question. Let's see here. What are several Second Amendment cases that have reached decisions in various levels of court between April 2024 and August 2024? And there were some that they gave me. So Rahimi is one that comes to mind. I think that's one that the left is going to use to kind of beat us down. And if you guys aren't aware of that one, that was a domestic violence restraining order. How if you have one of those, it will prevent you from possessing or owning a gun. And a lot of people say, you know, bad facts in that case. The Rahimi may not have been the best person to try to challenge that law, but it's what we had. And the decision was made in June, 8-1 decision that said the law does not violate the Constitution. Right. And so I feel like that has kind of emboldened the left to seek more anti-gun right legislation. One of the other ones that it talked about was U.S. v. Daniels, and this was a federal law that prohibits drug users from having guns. And in this one, the federal district court ruled in favor of the government, but then it went up to the Third Circuit. And the Third Circuit said that the Justice Department had not met its burden of proof. And that's kind of it. There were some other ones that we have talked about on our live chat. You know, there's 4 laws out of Illinois regarding Illinois' assault weapons ban. And all of those, the Supreme Court, we kind of knew that this was going to happen, but the Supreme Court kicked it back and said, you know, basically, finish this, wait till it's all the way completed through the state courts or through the district courts before they would be willing to hear it. And I was kind of surprised that there's some, in my opinion, some big cases that have come out recently that AI, Google's AI, ChatGPT, Twitter, X's AI, Grok had no mention of that we know have happened in that time frame that I have asked the AI to tell me about. Or if you were to Google, you know, Second Amendment cases, you're going to see tons of cases about Rahimi. You're not going to see anything else about some of these other ones that we're going to touch on today. So the first one that I want to touch on is coming out of the Fifth Circuit. And I think this is the most recent case, and I'm recording this August 5th. This is the National Association for Gun Rights v. Garland, and this is ATF's Force Reset Trigger is a machine gun ruling. And so the judge ruled in our favor, if you want to think of it that way, in the gun owner's favor. And there was some really strong language on this one that I think really hits home at what we are dealing with as gun owners. All right. So this is from the judge in the order. This is I forgot what the title of this one is, but it's coming out of 5th District. Oh yeah. The National Association for Gun Rights v. Garland. And this is towards the end, the judge said, every year our country commemorates the revolution waged against a tyrannical executive. To safeguard against future tyranny, our founding documents designed a system that prevents undue concentrations of power in order to protect important rights and to ensure that a legislative consensus is reached before enacting laws on the most important issues in society. Such foresight is especially prudent in cases like this one. Indeed, while this case may seem focused on firearms, it represents so much more. It is emblematic of a devastating problem that increasingly rears its head in federal courts: rampant evasion of the democratic process. Few issues more acutely underscore this problem than the present case. Our nation would do well to remember the very reasons and spirit that inspired our democratic system of governance in the first place. So, what does this mean in a nutshell? Well, according to this judge, and I think it was vacated, this came out of the fifth district, force reset triggers are not machine guns. It'd be interesting. You can have a legit serialized machine gun, right? And I think in our opening video on the TLD videos, you see one of us shooting a machine gun. Although we've blocked it out now because YouTube knows best. But I could hold that up and I could say this is a machine gun, right? Well, then you also look at what ATF says is a machine gun, or how they've classified things as machine guns in the past. I can hold up a bump stock and say, until recently, this piece of plastic is a machine gun. I can hold up a force reset trigger, say this force reset trigger is a machine gun. Or you can have a lower receiver, the serialized lower receiver that is recorded in the ATF as a machine gun. That lower receiver is considered the machine gun because that's the serialized part. So here's a chunk of aluminum that is a machine gun. Or an auto sear that is a machine gun. Or what was that credit card that dude designed that, according to the ATF, that credit card with a drawing on it is a machine gun. So in today's day and age, when we're as gun owners trying to figure out what are the laws, because we don't want to break laws, we're trying to be law-abiding citizens. How do we function as gun owners in today's society where it seems like there's a law against anything and everything that you want to do with a gun? Open carry, concealed carry. Well, you got to have a permit. What if it's in a car, in plain view, right? I mean, that's another case that we'll talk about. But the ATF has overstepped quite a bit recently, and it's great to see cases like this one where I believe the court really shuts down the ATF's authority and kind of puts them in their place, rightfully so. So again, in this case regarding force reset triggers, the court vacated the unlawful classification of FRTs as quote unquote machine guns. The court declares unlawful defendants' determination that FRTs are machine guns. The defendants here were the ATF, the DOJ. The court enjoins defendants, along with their respective officers, agents, servants, and employees, from implementing or enforcing against the parties in this lawsuit in any civil or criminal matter described below the ATF's expanded definition of machine gun to FRTs that this court has determined is unlawful. So here's some things that they say, okay, the ATF cannot do. Initiate or pursue criminal prosecutions for possessing a force reset trigger. Initiating or pursuing civil proceedings for possessing, selling, or manufacturing force reset triggers based on the claim that FRTs are machine guns. So for those of you that may not know the difference between the civil side and the criminal side, right? Criminal side, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. You are going to, if the court rules against you, you're going to go to jail. On the civil side, there's civil penalties, right? So you're going to have to pay some type of restitution. One thing that a lot of people don't understand or they may not know on the civil side, you have what are called treble damages. So let's say the government can prove with the preponderance of the evidence that you somehow gamed the system and you fraudulently obtained $1 million. Well, there could be a ruling against you that you have to pay 3 times that back on the civil restitution and civil penalties. The other thing too, I mentioned, prove with a preponderance of the evidence. I believe that's the legal threshold. So on the criminal side, you got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And a great way to think about it, the way that a lawyer had instructed me is, if you are 99% sure that the person is guilty, then you have to, as a juror, you have to vote that they're innocent, because there's that 1% chance that they might be innocent. And that means that the government did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That 1% difference, that's the reasonable doubt in your mind. So the government failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person did whatever they said they did. On the civil side, the threshold is a lot lower. So preponderance of the evidence. Does the evidence generally show that you did whatever the government says that you did? So in terms of, let's take product substitution, a contract fraud type case, right? So let's say you are a seller of air conditioners, and the government comes to you and they say, we want to buy 1,000 air conditioning units, brand new. They have to be brand new, and they have to be whatever, 1,200 BTU. I don't know what they are, 1,200 BTU, brand new air conditioners. And you say, sure, got it, right? And in order to cut costs, you give them 1,000 BTU refurbished air conditioners, but you tell them that they're brand new. Okay. And so you did that because you wanted to obtain something of value from the government, right? Let's say the contract was for $1 million. If you were to buy all brand new stuff, and let's say it cost you 800,000, your profit would have been 200,000. But by buying refurbished, maybe your profit's 500,000, right? So you made $300,000 more. Well, depending on how the courts rule, against you, if the government can prove with the preponderance of the evidence that you did whatever they said that you did, you sold refurbished units instead of brand new, you're going down. And you're going to have to pay a lot of money back. You're not just going to have to pay, in some instances, not just your profit, the whole amount. So you got $1 million, right? And maybe your profit on that was only $500,000, but under treble damages, like you made $500,000, but you're going to have to pay back $3 million. So they can initiate civil proceedings against you if you possess, if you sold, if you're building force reset triggers. They can't do that. Initiating or pursuing criminal prosecutions for representing to the public of potential buyers and sellers that FRTs are not machine guns. So think about it. Think of this, right? A violation of, man, we're going to spend a lot of time on this case. I look at that as a violation of your First Amendment. So if you tell someone that a force reset trigger is not a machine gun, right? Before this order was put in place, before this law was overturned, if you represented to the public that an FRT was not a machine gun, they could initiate CNDs, criminal and or civil proceedings against you and try to prosecute you just for you telling people that FRTs are not machine guns. Right? How crazy is that? So anyways, they can't do that. Sending notice letters or other similar communications stating that FRTs are machine guns. So the ATF's got to stop doing that. This is a big one. Seizing or requesting, quote unquote, voluntarily surrender of FRTs to the government based on the claim that FRTs are machine guns. How many people are out there that heard this from the ATF, right? They went out, they bought a force reset trigger. Everything was above board. Everything was legal. Then the ATF changed his mind. Nope, those are machine guns now. And because we classify them as machine guns, you got to turn them over. People did. So how are those people going to be made whole? Because you know that there's not some force reset trigger sitting on a shelf somewhere with John Doe's name on it. The ATF probably destroyed that, right? And so now the taxpayers are going to be out money because the ATF is going to have to pay back these people that they took these FRTs from, which leads into G. destroying any previously surrendered or seized FRTs. Like, ATF screwed on that one, man. And then the last one, otherwise interfering in the possession, sale, manufacture, transfer, or exchange of FRTs based on the claim that FRTs are machine guns. Bottom line, force reset triggers are not machine guns. They never were. We've been, screaming at the top, at the mountaintops since the ATF came out with this ruling, saying, how is this possible, right? The way that you define a machine gun, an FRT does not fit that definition. And the ATF said, we don't care. So that's a huge win for gun owners. FRTs are not machine guns. We never thought that they were. And thankfully, finally, the ATF knows that as well. And there's a lot of stuff that I feel like they came just short of calling the ATF criminal in their actions, which I think if you ask any gun owner, they would tell you that. Like that, the fact that they lied to people and said that these are machine guns and seized property, kind of forced people to quote unquote voluntarily surrender them, which is bogus because they only voluntarily surrender them under threat of these things we just talked about: threat of prosecution, threat of civil proceedings. Imagine the ATF, some grandfather that bought an FRT because he thought it'd be fun, and they're busting down this door at 6 a.m. Right? I'm sure it's happened. So that's a huge win for us, for gun owners. But if you were to Google that, like, unless you know what to look for, you know what laws the Supreme Court's thinking about considering and things like that, it'd be very hard for you to find out that law. So I would encourage you guys. There's some places that I love following. Firearms Policy Coalition on Twitter or Instagram. Like, they're all over social media. I love those guys. The other one that's kind of local to me here in Washington is Second Amendment Foundation, I think, or Second Amendment Federate. I think it's Foundation, SAF. And I feel like they're out there fighting the fight just like FPC. So I follow those guys. Go to their website, find the news section over there, and there's a couple more legal jargon things that I want to talk about. The second one, this is out of Pennsylvania, and this is a Middle District of Pennsylvania. It's a federal Second Amendment lawsuit, Suarez v. Paris. And this is where multiple Pennsylvania laws require permits to open carry. Those were declared unconstitutional. And I think this was a SAF lawsuit. I don't remember. Yeah. So District Judge Christopher Connor with the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania issued an order granting summary judgment to SAF and its partners, finding the state's law banning carry of a firearm in a vehicle without a license unconstitutional. He further declared that a ban on firearms possession without a license during a state of emergency is facially unconstitutional, and enjoined Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner Colonel Christopher Paris from enforcing those provisions. So, if I remember correctly, this was an interesting one. This was a guy who, I think, open carry in Pennsylvania is illegal, if I remember correctly. And if you please correct me in the comments or join our Discord and correct me over there. But if I remember the story behind this, guy was, you can't open carry, and but I think you can legally concealed carry. The guy gets in his car, and for comfort, he takes his holster off of his person and sets it in his passenger seat. And he gets pulled over for whatever, speeding or a light being out. I don't remember why he got pulled over. He gets pulled over. And right, there's the gun. And in the trooper's mind, well, that's in plain sight. Therefore, you're open carrying. There's no law that says you can do that. In fact, it's a violation of the law for you to open carry. So they hook this dude up. I mean, they arrest them. Um, let's see here. Yeah, so carrying of a firearm in a vehicle, in order to do that, you need a license, and that was ruled unconstitutional. So again, great thing on Second Amendment Foundation and Firearms Policy Coalition. Those guys, I feel like are kind of fighting the fight. I think there's some people that disagree with me, but um, if I were to give money, if I do give money to folks, it's them. You got to think, as gun owners, we're kind of put in kind of a crappy position, in my opinion. Especially places like where I live. I live in Washington State, right? Not gun friendly at all. And so my taxes are going to a state government to take my rights away from me. And then what I have to do is I have to take my money and I have to give it to places like Firearms Policy Coalition or Second Amendment Foundation or someone that's willing to sue the state on my behalf to get my rights back. Right. And this is it's kind of interesting when you think about it. Like the Second Amendment is not telling the government that they need to give us these rights. The Second Amendment, God has given us these rights, or whatever creator you believe in, right? These are inalienable. We were born with these rights. And the Second Amendment is telling the government that, hey, these are rights that the people have. They're born with these rights. And you as a government cannot take these rights away. And what happens? Of course, the government does. You get these power-hungry leftists that take our rights away. They live for that. There's whole organizations that have been built to take our rights away. And so my tax money here in the state of Washington is going to fund that, going to fund taking my own rights away. And I got to pay some other company, corporation, legal team to go and hopefully win my rights back. And it's not cheap. And we will probably lose in state court. And so I get it. Like people that live in California and New York, and like you guys have been living this fight a lot longer than I have. So I feel your pain now, but it's just it's not very fair, right? And the government should not restrict people of their rights. And it's kind of funny when I moved here, I remember people telling me like, oh, well, the Washington State's Second Amendment is so much stronger than the federal government's, the constitutional Second Amendment. Not in the eyes of the state Supreme Court here, right? Those guys have no problem taking away your rights. All right. So another one, and this is kind of this will be the last one we talk about. And this is one that is probably going to make some people angry, and just my opinion on this one. But this is the Supreme Court's ruling on bump stocks. Okay. And the quote that I loved from this one was, quote unquote, ATF can't rewrite law. Now, this is probably an area for some frustration with my fellow gun owners, because this decision happened under President Trump, right? And I've said for quite a bit, I don't think that President Trump is entirely pro Second Amendment. I mean, I think he gets favorable reviews from the NRA, which is questionable, right? That organization is questionable. I'm very concerned, especially since he survived this attempt on his life. I'm hoping that he doesn't pull a Reagan and sign something like the Brady Act into law. Right, that happened after the attempted assassination on President Reagan. So I'm hoping Trump doesn't go down that route. But you look at his past, well, bump stock ruling, right? The bump stocks are machine guns. That determination came down while he was president, right? Or what about his quote regarding red flag laws of take the guns, worry about due process later? It's fly smack in the face of the Constitution. So I think that it's fair for us to call out when people on our side of the aisle are wrong. I think we should do it more often. I think we should hold people's feet to the fire. I don't think that it's right that we blindly follow. Okay. So you got to think he's been out of office for years now. And finally, just June of this year, the Supreme Court ruled that a piece of plastic, right? I mean, basically something that looks like this was a machine gun. Finally, the Supreme Court said, no, are you crazy? That's not a machine gun. And again, I love the quote, ATF can't rewrite the law. Um, so the ruling, it was a 6-3 ruling. The case was known as Garland v. Cargill. And this is from the Second Amendment Foundation founder and their executive vice president. He said, this is a significant victory for gun owners because it reminds the ATF it simply cannot rewrite federal law. The agency has just been reminded that it can only enforce the law, not usurp the authority of Congress. And I love what Justice Clarence Thomas wrote. He said, we hold that a semi-automatic rifle equipped with a bump stock is not a machine gun because it cannot fire more than one shot by a single function of the trigger. Again, the definition of a machine gun, you pull the trigger and you hold the trigger back and multiple rounds fire. And that's not what a bump stock did. Okay. The bump stock still was just one round per firing, per pulling of the trigger. So Justice Clarence Thomas, we hold that a semi-automatic rifle equipped with a bump stock is not a machine gun because it cannot fire more than one shot by a single function of the trigger. And even if it could, it would not do so automatically. ATF therefore exceeded its statutory authority by issuing a rule that classifies bump stocks as machine guns. And I love this. I think the ATF has been blasted left and right this summer. I think it's great news. I think it's great news for gun owners, and I hope it continues. I know that there's a lot of folks here in Washington State. There's a lot of things that I want to purchase that I can't. I know the folks in Illinois are hurting right now. There's 4 lawsuits, I believe, challenging the various assault weapons bans that they have there. Praying for those guys that reaches a conclusion that we all can agree on is a good ruling. The biggest thing and the thing that I want to close on, guys, is that I think a lot of us feel like our vote doesn't matter. And it's tough, like in places like where I'm at, again, here in Washington, a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel like, well, the state is controlled by Seattle. However Seattle votes, that's the way that the state is going to go. And I want to tell them of an interesting statistic that I found while I was researching this. If the people in Eastern Washington, if we would have just gotten 5% more people on the east side of the state to come out and vote, we would have won the governorship, lieutenant governorship, or we would have won down the line. We would have had pro-gun candidates, pro-gun people in those positions. But I think, and rightfully so, too often people have gone to the point where they say, you know what, my vote doesn't count, so I'm not going to vote. I would encourage you, there's statistics out that Washington Gun Law put out. There are 10 million gun owners that are not registered to vote. I encourage you to get out. Please register to vote. Let your voice be heard in the ballot box. Right? Help to change some of these laws from the political side of the House. Don't just cry about it after it happens. Let's do something. Let's try to do something to affect change now. I've said it before too on our live chat, and I've talked about it in our family. Do I think that my vote or my voice is heard in Washington, D.C.? No, I don't. Do I think my vote or my voice is heard in Olympia, here in Washington? No, I don't. But is my voice and vote heard in the city council elections, the election for mayor, the school board, the county commissioner? Absolutely, I do. And I think we need to do our best to have a strong foundation here locally, wherever you live locally, have a strong foundation there, get people on our side of the aisle in those areas, and then work up from there. Eventually, I think we can win back these anti-gun states and hopefully win back an anti-gun government like we have been doing this summer. I hope these rulings continue. I hope Second Amendment Foundation and Firearms Policy Coalition continually brings the pain to ATF and to disarmament regime. And if you don't want to donate money to those guys, probably the best thing that you could do for the Second Amendment, buy some ammo, take a non-gun friend out shooting with you, and teach them the fundamentals, teach them the basics, bring over one more person to our side, because that one vote can count. All right, guys. Well, that's it for me with this State of the 2A episode of Everyman's Arsenal. I'm curious how you like this. This isn't going to be something that we're going to do weekly or monthly. You know, when there's enough court cases that come up that I want to talk about and tell you all about, this is something that I want to do. And I'm interested if you guys like it or not. And if you don't, yeah, I'll probably still do it anyways. But really curious of getting input. And as we get closer to the next one, maybe even a poll and get some ideas from you guys of what you'd like me to talk about. Yeah, educate each other across the board. I think education can be helpful in this day and age. Education on where we are with our laws across the nation. That's it for me, guys. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you listening in. Catch you on the next one.